So we have, as sociologists, a series of stakes, and here I come back to more to the fundamentals of the theory and the methodology that I try to promote. We have to try to explain the strengths of the neoliberal cycle in most societies and at a global level, and understand why, after such a violent shock as the crisis of 2008-2009, a big financial crisis, systemic crisis that has led the financial world to in a sense fall apart or be very close to completely explode. It has not only remained, but remained very strong, this neoliberal creed, to speak like colleagues, now Fourcade and Sarah Babb, and has finally had very strong social consequences, especially in Greece, of course, and many countries, but few ideological consequences, at least apparently. But we have to understand the contradictions of this field, and it's clear that such an expanded field of economic policies has many hands, at least two hands, to speak like Bourdieu, the left hand, the right hand. In a sense, it has more. It's very multidimensional. So, and here the metaphors can be very diverse because, it's something that has many hands. So there are many things that may have many hands in the nature. And with a major divide between social change and especially the expansion of the social functions of the state, especially in education and health, basically, and conservatism, reduction of these functions, which is also part of the field of economic policies. And the struggles and the tensions occur between these two major poles. But it's, of course, a very strong simplification to say that there are only two poles such as this. And again, we have to understand why a crisis of finance, of private finance coming from the US, has led to a new wave of financialization, which is even, in a sense, more encompassing, more complex, more general, I would say, than what had happened before, and that after the crisis. We have to understand that. Of course, one of the possibilities and the keys to understand that is to understand the changes in monetary policies. Something very important has occurred in the dynamics of financial capitalism with the crisis, and it has particularly happened in the interactions between central banks and the financial world and the financial system. At least it's the hypothesis that I want to try to develop a bit here. Just to finish on the theory and methodology that I use, and just to be a bit more concrete again, what I try to do is to analyze specific institutions. But by institutions, I don't refer to very general institution or very abstract institution. I try to be as precise as possible with especially the size of the institutions that are at stake. And so a government is of course an institution. A government is not the state. A government is a council, a cabinet, is a collection of persons, of individuals. Of course, they have resources. They have, in France, we say cabinet for the people that assistants, the people who work with them. Of course, it doesn't reduce to one single person, but it's at that level that decisions are made as regards, especially the general level of the budget deficit. It involves, of course, the parliaments, especially in systems that give a certain role, or at least an important role to the parliaments. But it also, and it's very important in my work, relates to much more concentrated institutions, such as the committees, the monetary policy committees, which are very small institutions in the sense that they are composed of a very limited number of voting people. That is, people that take directly part to the decision. And concentrate heavy effects or important effects on the populations and economic institutions. Probably, in my view at least, monetary committees are the most concentrated places of power in the field of economic policies. But of course, they are interconnected and interdependent with other institutions, such as, obviously, in the Eurozone, it's obvious, institutions that relate to the governments, of course, the member states, but also, of course, a set of institutions that relate to the European construction. In general, what is difficult is the fact that monetary policy is an easy case. For me, it was the easiest case because very concentrated, few people, and very influential decisions. But most of the economic policy cases are less simple than that. So, in a sense, I began with what I saw, discuss that again, as the probably most simple in terms of sociology, maybe not in terms of technicalities and in terms of issues, because issues that are debated in a monetary council are very, very complex, but in terms of how can we deal with this particular institution. So it's a choice that I made quite a few times after during my thesis, even during my thesis, that I was very captivated in a sense by the creation of the new Banque de France, the independent Banque de France, which would replace an institution in order to build the European Central Bank. And I followed the process over time, and I was never, nothing gave me any doubt about the fact that there is a centrality in this process. And all the events that occurred, and even the financial crisis of 2008, 2009 was even stronger than all other events from that point of view, pointed to the centrality of central banks in the system of economic policies. Of course, these institutions, and that's what I will now stress, are composed of individuals. And these individuals, they have social characteristics. They have dispositions, as we say in Bourdieu's terms. They have habituses. These dispositions, they are acquired through their education, through their socialization, political, religious, that's important, primary socialization, and their professional trajectory. And all that leads them to a particular view of monetary policy. And when they act as a member of a council, they of course try to present, and they of course have to present their position as universal, as stemming from the general interest, but they are also individual actors that have their system of preferences, which is socially structured, socially constructed, which really is a basic element that I take from Bourdieu's theory. Of course, that doesn't mean that legal rules and legal issues are not important, but legal issues, and Bourdieu insisted a lot on that, the norms, the official norms, the rules that regulate a practice, family or any practice, and here the practice of these institutions are part of the game, of course, are very important. They may change, and part of the struggles are about their change, but there are also assets with which actors may play. And we have seen with the case of the ECB decisions that it's never written what will be the final answer to a legal issue like the constitutionality of a decision, which is, of course, a major stake in the case of the ECB and in the case especially of the Draghi Governing Council. So to sum up, what I do, and I will present my case study now, is to study agents who have dispositions, positions, position takings, who speak, who argue, but on the basis of their dispositions, inside committees. So inside power relations and interactions, both are intertwined, linked. They produce discourses. And what I try to do, and I think it's the first step, I don't mean it's really the definitive answer to anything. I think it's really a first exploratory step to understand what is at stake and what happens, is to model, to have a geometric picture of that. And for that, I use geometric data analysis methods, which is not just a tool like this, it's really a way to show those complex social realities as spaces which are multidimensional, which may imply a large variety of assets. And so I come now to the empirical case. So I will present it very shortly just to show you, to give you an idea of what I do and what I intend to enlarge to all sorts of institutions at all sorts of levels, because I think it's relevant. is to, in this case, analyze all the members of the governing council of the ECB, provided they are real members, I would say, but they are there at a moment, sometimes very short period of time, and it's a variable that one has to inspect, and we only began to do that. So I've taken all the individuals from the beginning that have had a position in the governing council, either as governors for a national central bank, of the national central bank, or members of the executive board. And taking all these individuals, searching for information about their position takings, which may seem a bit difficult because we don't have the nominative information about what they say and what they vote inside the committee, which is not the case in the US, as you know. In the Federal Open Market Committee, we have the minutes which are personalized in a sense. We know who said what and who did what, which I think is very important in economic policy. We have to know who did and who thinks what. Here it's a bit more difficult, so we have to use external information, such as typically that kind of information that is biographical data on ECB members. But just a point, before doing that, a few elements about the context, very rapidly. The context of what are the governors of central banks in the world today. We are doing an in-depth study of that on the basis of all sorts of biographical information. First, it's a very masculine population. It's no surprise, but the feminization, the rate of feminization is very, very low until today. It's rising, but very, very slowly. It's a sector that is very highly professionalized and scienticized or scientified. The expression is a bit complex, especially in the global north, where a lot of, and I don't give you the figures because I want to be rapid, but almost half of the governors have a PhD. Actually, they are highly qualified. They have gone to the academy. They are, in a sense, colleagues that at a moment become central bankers at the top level. We focus here in this study on the top levels because it's the decision level in this sector, which is highly concentrated, which doesn't mean that there is no sort of influence or any sort of influence by intermediary or even lower levels of decision inside the central bank, for example. It's of course the case, but here we focus on the persons that finally decide. It's like in a government. Of course, in the government, there is a background process that is very important, and the position that is taken by a member of the government is a summary of a very large amount of interactions and resource combinations and resource accumulation. But at the end, it's the person that decides. It's the person that votes. In this field, you have also trends like the growing importance of people coming from finance or coming from the private sector, which are more and more important, especially in certain regions of the world. It's not necessarily the case in the Eurozone. The ECB has particular characteristics. It's highly scientized, composed of actors, especially at the executive board, with a very high level of qualification, academic qualification. It's probably at the highest level, especially when you consider the members of the executive board, of course. And also a particular trait, a particular feature, which is a feature of the European construction in general, but the Eurozone in particular here, and the economic monetary sector of the European construction, the fact that legal resources, legal components are still very important. So you find lawyers, and the importance of law cannot be denied in the field of monetary policy. Of course, it's obvious when we speak about regulations, and especially because the ECB has a particular role in financial regulation, but it's not limited to that. It's also related to the characteristics of the people. Being a lawyer doesn't eliminate you from the competition to access top positions in the field of central banking, which is not the case in other regions of the world. So now I come back to my question. Are there sociological bases for the shift towards less hawkish monetary policies in the years 2010, during all this period of very complex crisis in general, including, of course, Greek crisis. And of course, you can already guess my answer. I will answer yes. There are sociological bases for that. But the point is that which are the bases? One of the classical answers is to say, well, there has been a shift to an influence of Germany, a dominance of Germany, which had influenced the setting of the institution, the ECB, which was a sort of a copy of the Bundesbank, and a shift towards other countries, more influential. And I think it's part of the answer. It's only part. It's only a small part of the answer. There are more structural, sociological determinants of this shift, which relate to aspects of the trajectories of the people. How do I demonstrate that? I will not be very technical here. I will just show you some of the graphs just to give you an idea of the way we proceed. We proceed like I mentioned, that is to collect biographical information of these actors. 63, I mean, it's not 63, that's a mistake here. At that time, that was 5-6 years ago, it was in 2016, even 7. Now we have 85, so we have extended the population, and hopefully, and that's good for us, we have similar results. So it does not change the results. And I will just show you that, of course, we have an issue which is something quite difficult to deal with, is the fact that we have very small population, and how to discard the effects of chance, the effects of, it's in French, le hasard, with so small populations. And we have techniques for that. It's called combinatorial inference, and I work with on that with mathematicians, colleagues, Brigitte Leroux especially. And we can, from the descriptive conclusions that we get from our data, extend our conclusions thanks to inferential procedures, which are sort of conditions to be able to discard with a high level of certainty the probability that these results are only due to chance, that could have been different with particular contingent conditions. So here I summarize the methodology, and you see the questions. Do the positions of the bankers explain, in a sense, or allow to explain, or allow to try to explain their position takings? There are publications on that, and I will summarize the results. So first, what are the biographical information that we take into account? It's, of course, a bit limited. We are always a bit, well, we would like to have more on religious socialization, on political socialization, on social origin of fathers, mothers, grandparents, and so on. But it's very difficult to get at this level, to get homogeneous data. What do we get easily is to have the educational information. Of course, that's quite easy, especially for the academics, because they give that in CVs. We have this institution of the CV, of the academic CV, which allows us to have a lot of information, at least from our education to our professional trajectory. We have information about the professional trajectories. We have added some information about public visibility here, that is present in the Financial Times, visibility through the media. That is a sort of index of symbolic capital through the media, if you are visible or not. So we proceed to multiple correspondence analysis, which is one of these tools, multidimensional tools, that allow us to get summary in terms of main dimensions of the space, of what is, what does this social space consist of. And we have here the cloud of the 33 categories in the first principal plane, which I will explain. I will explain the axes. The axes, you have to interpret them. You have to do an interpretation on the basis of contribution. There are methods for that. You have here the cloud of individuals. That is, you have a tool that allows you to visualize the individuals, not the way I've shown you the picture at the beginning with their picture. You can even put their picture here, but the distances here, they are created by the properties, the biographical properties that you put in your model. So the more you have information, in the sense, the more you have basic information, the best is your summary. And here, of course, the limitation of the analysis is directly related to the limitations of the information that we managed to get. It's already a lot, I think, and it already gives rather good results. So first, we have an axis that is clearly an axis of academic capital, opposing the ones that have made their main career in university, have studied in the UK here, or have had a PhD and so on. That's the right pole, versus the one that never had a career in the university, have an education level of master and not PhD, and so on. So you see a clear opposition. And these methods allow you, in general, to have rather, of course, if you selected the appropriate variables, that makes sense with the field. That is consistent with the qualitative information that you get from articles, interviews, other qualitative observation about this particular field, that there is an opposition between the ones that rely on academic legitimacy and the ones that rely less on academic legitimacy. The ones that have been socialized in a more academic environment and the ones that have not. Second axis, a bit different. It's an opposition which is very, very classical in the field of central banks. I met this opposition before doing any MCA or any statistical analysis even. It was the words that were used by actors to describe two types of leading central bankers, the ones that are insiders, the ones that are outsiders, the ones that come from the inside of the central bank, that have done all their career inside the central bank. And it's getting more and more important in the world because there is a process of professionalization and scientization inside the central bank that makes the internal civil servants of the central bank candidates for the leadership of the central bank, which is not obvious. Typically in France, it hasn't yet been the case that someone coming from the Banque de France becomes the governor in the new conditions. I mean, the new conditions of the ECB, that is after a long period of the independent central bank. So that's an interesting opposition that is very robust and that you find here. It's the second axis. So it's a second axis that allows you to summarize your data. Finally, there is a third axis, which I will not comment, and I will comment now the graphs very rapidly to finish. And you see that it makes sense that there is an opposition between hawks and doves, the hawks being the ones that are the more devoted to monetary orthodoxy, to the fight against inflation, to a reluctance against quantitative easing or all sorts of non-conventional methods. It's a sort of package, of course. It's a classification that is very rude, very crude, very raw in a sense, but which makes sense in terms of differentiations, and especially against the doves. And you see that the doves, they appear, their mean point here, you see the mean point, but you see also that they are dispersed around the mean point. They are closer to the academic capital pole, and they are also more often outsiders. They have this double dimension. So we do a descriptive analysis, and finally, with our inductive approach, we conclude that we have a lot of techniques allowing us to do that there is, in the first principal plane, atypicality between the doves and the hawks. They don't have the same social characteristics. And especially the doves are more closely connected by their trajectory to the academic world. So their deviations from the center is not due to chance. Our techniques allow us to conclude that. And we also have this technique, which is a compatibility region, which shows, and it's very intuitive, that in inferential terms, there is a very, very small probability that there is an overlapping and that we missed something, saying that they are atypical. So I think we really have good tools allowing us to be sure that this differentiation between hawks and doves really relate to the dimensions, the two first dimensions that we have found in our analysis. Finally, the homogeneity again. We found the heterogeneity. This time it's not about atypicality, it's about heterogeneity between the two extreme groups of doves and hawks who are heterogeneous in the plane. So this work is now being actualized, and we find similar results. So it's good to know that even when you take into account people that have entered the ECB, there is a stability of the process. Of course, after 2020, especially 2022, the conditions are changing. There is the rise of inflation. There is a new stake that is occurring, and it's one of the difficulties that the position takings will necessarily change in orientation and side during this period, which I have only begun to analyze. But there was a strong stability, and the strong stability on the side of the doves, supporting the Draghi orientation, which was clearly strongly based on the relation to the academy and the international academic debate. In our recent studies, we are also interested in the effects of the feminization and the generalization of the progressist discourse regarding gender issues at the ECB. Similarly, we have a very rapid change as regards ecological issues, and we want to understand what are the basis of position takings regarding the ecological issues in this institution. I will stop here. Sorry for having been a bit long. I would have other things to say, but I will conclude here. Thank you so much.